Your daily bridge to fluency starts right now. I'm VA, and let's master your English flow.
The Man Who Calculated by Malba Tahan. Chapter 1. The Man with Two Names. Let us begin our journey in a beautiful city by the sea. The city is Rio de Janeiro in the country of Brazil. It is a place of bright sun, green mountains, and white sandy beaches. The year is near the start of the 20th century. The streets are busy with people, and the air smells of salt and coffee. In this loud and happy city, there lived a teacher. He looked like a normal man. He wore a suit and carried books. To his neighbors, he was just a school teacher who taught mathematics. His name was Julio Cesar de Mello Souza. He was born in 1895. He lived a quiet life with his family. However, inside his head, Julio was not in Brazil. Inside his head, he was thousands of miles away. He was traveling across the hot sands of a distant desert. Julio had a problem. He loved numbers. He loved algebra and geometry. He saw beauty in the way numbers worked together, but his students did not see this beauty. To the students, mathematics was scary. It was dry and boring. It was just a list of hard rules on a chalkboard. When Julio looked at his students, he saw fear in their eyes. He wanted to change this. He wanted to show them that math was full of magic and wonder. He remembered when he was a small boy. He loved to read stories. His favorite book was a collection of old tales called The 1001 Nights. These were stories from the Middle East. They were about flying carpets, powerful genies, and wise kings. They were about the hot sun of the Arabian desert and the cool oasis water. When he read these stories, he could not stop. He realized that people love to listen to a good story. Julio had a brilliant idea. He decided to play a game with the world. He would not write his math books as Julio Cesar, the teacher from Rio. No one would think a Brazilian teacher knew the secrets of ancient wisdom. Instead, he invented a new person. He created a character named Malba Tahan. Malba Tahan was not from Brazil. In the story Julio created, Malba Tahan was a famous scholar from Persia. He was a wise man who traveled the old world. He had a long beard and wore robes. He knew the secrets of the stars and the numbers. Julio worked very hard to make Malba Tahan seem real. He studied late into the night. He read the holy books of the East. He studied the history of Arab kings and the geography of the desert lands. He learned the names of the coins they used and the food they ate. He learned how they greeted each other with peace and respect. He did all of this without ever leaving Brazil. He built an entire world inside his imagination. Soon, the books by Malba Tahan appeared in stores. Everyone loved them. They were not boring math books. They were adventure stories. In these books, camels walked across the dunes and merchants argued in the markets. But to solve the problems in the story, the characters had to use mathematics. The readers were learning algebra without even knowing it. They were having fun. The most famous of all his books was called The Man Who Counted. It was published in 1938. It told the story of a man named Baramiz Samir. Baramiz was a genius. He could count the leaves on a tree just by looking at them. He could solve problems that made kings and rich men confused. Through the eyes of Baramiz, the world became a puzzle waiting to be solved. Julio Cesar de Mello Souza wrote many books. He wrote more than 100 of them, but he will always be remembered as Malba Tahan. He was the man with two names. He was the teacher who turned a boring classroom into a magical desert. Now we are going to open the pages of his greatest story. We are going to leave the busy streets of Rio de Janeiro behind. We will close our eyes and imagine the hot wind of the desert. We will imagine the smell of spices and the sound of camels walking on the sand. We are going to meet the man who could count the stars. The story begins on a road that leads to the great city of Baghdad. It is there that a traveler meets a strange man sitting on a rock. This meeting will lead to many adventures. It will lead to puzzles about birds, jewels, and camels. Listen closely, for the story is about to start. Chapter 2: 3 Brothers and the Impossible Inheritance. The sun was high in the sky. It was a ball of fire that burned the earth below. The desert was vast and silent. In every direction, there was only yellow sand and blue sky. The heat rose from the ground in waving lines, making the distant dunes look like water. But it was a trick of the eyes. There was no water here, only the dry, hot wind. I was traveling to the great city of Baghdad. I rode upon my camel, swaying back and forth with the animal's slow steps. Beside me walked my new friend, Baramiz Samir. He was the man who counted. He did not seem to mind the heat. His eyes were always looking at the world, counting the palm trees in the distance or the birds in the sky. He found numbers in everything. We had been traveling for many hours when we heard a strange noise. It broke the silence of the empty desert. It was the sound of shouting. The voices were loud and angry. "Wait," Baramiz said. He stopped walking and held up a hand. "Do you hear that? It sounds like a fight." We moved closer to investigate. Ahead of us, near a small cluster of rocks, we saw a large herd of animals. There were many camels standing together. They were fine, strong beasts with light brown fur. They chewed on dry grass and swished their tails to chase away the flies. They looked very peaceful. But the men standing next to the camels were not peaceful at all. There were 3 men. They were brothers. They wore long robes covered in the dust of the road. Their faces were red with anger. They stood in a circle, waving their hands and pointing fingers at each other. They were shouting so loudly that they scared the birds away from the rocks. "It cannot be done," one man shouted. "You are trying to cheat me." "I am not cheating you," the second man yelled back. "It is simple math, but the numbers do not work." "I will not accept this," the third man screamed. "I want what is mine." Baramiz stepped forward. His voice was calm and steady, like a cool breeze in the fire of the argument. "Peace be with you," Baramiz said. "Why are you fighting? We are travelers on the road to Baghdad. We heard your anger from far away. Brothers should not fight like enemies." The 3 men stopped shouting. They looked at Baramiz. They saw a simple man in old clothes, but there was wisdom in his face. The oldest brother took a deep breath and stepped forward to explain. "Stranger," the oldest brother said, wiping sweat from his forehead, "we are fighting because of our father. He was a good man, but he has left us a terrible problem. He passed away recently, and he left us this herd of camels as our inheritance." He pointed to the animals. "There are 35 camels in total. They are all we have." Baramiz nodded. 35 is a good number. Why is this a problem?" "It is the will of our father," the brother continued. "He gave us very specific instructions on how to share the camels, but we cannot follow them. We have tried for hours. We have shouted until our throats are sore. But the math is impossible." The oldest brother looked at the camels with frustration. "I am the oldest. According to my father's will, I must receive half of the camels. That is my right." Baramis thought for a moment. "Half of 35, he whispered. "Exactly," the brother said. "Do you know what half of 35 is? It is 17 and a half. How can I take 17 and a half camels? I cannot cut a camel in two. A dead camel is worth nothing. If I take 17, I am taking too little. If I take 18, I am taking too much, and my brothers get angry." The second brother stepped forward. He crossed his arms over his chest. He looked just as stubborn as the first. "My problem is the same," the second brother said. "I am the middle brother. Our father said I must receive 1/3 of the camels, but try to divide 35 by 3. It does not work. It is 11 and a little bit. I cannot take a piece of a camel. If I take 11, I lose my share. If I take 12, the others say I am a thief." Then the youngest brother spoke. He was just a boy, but his eyes were fierce. "And I am the youngest. My father loved me, too. He said I must receive 1/9 of the camels, but 35 cannot be divided by 9. It is 3 and a large piece left over. What am I to do? Cut a leg off a camel and take it home." The 3 brothers stood there in the hot sun. They were stuck. The math was simple, but it was also cruel. 35 divided by 2 is 17.5. 35 divided by 3 is 11.66. 35 divided by 9 is 3.88. None of the divisions resulted in a whole number. Not a single camel could be moved without breaking the rules of the will. "We agreed that the will must be followed," the oldest brother said sadly. "Our father's words are law, but the numbers are fighting against us. We have been standing here for half a day. We are hot, we are thirsty, and we are no closer to an answer. We are ready to draw our swords and fight, for none of us will give up a single hair of a camel that belongs to him." The tension in the air was thick. The camels watched with big, dark eyes, chewing slowly, unaware that their lives were the cause of such hatred. The brothers looked at each other with suspicion. Greed had turned their love into war. I looked at the herd of 35 camels. I looked at the 3 angry men. I did not see a solution. To me, it seemed they would have to sell the camels and split the gold. But they refused to sell. They wanted the camels. Baramis stood silently. He looked at the sand. He looked at the sky. Then a small smile appeared on his face. It was the smile of a man who sees a path where others see only a wall. "My friends," Baramis said softly, "please do not be angry. There is no need for violence. This problem is not impossible. It only requires a new way of seeing the numbers." The brothers looked at him in surprise. "Can you solve it?" the oldest asked. "Are you a magician?" "I am not a magician," Baramis replied. "I am just a man who counts, and I believe I can help you divide this inheritance so that every brother is happy. But to do this, I will need a little help." Baramis turned to me. His eyes were shining with intelligence. "My friend," he said to me, "I need you to lend me your camel." Chapter 3: The Magic of the Extra Camel. I looked at Baramis with great surprise. We were alone in the middle of a hot, empty desert. My camel was my only way to travel. It carried my water, my food, and my body. Without it, I would be stuck in the sand. "You want my camel?" I asked. My voice was full of worry. "This animal is a beautiful beast. It has strong legs and a white coat. It is my most valuable possession. If I give it to you and we lose it, how will we continue our journey to Baghdad? Baramiz looked at me with calm, dark eyes. Trust me, my friend, he said. I will return your camel to you. In fact, I might even be able to give you a surprise. But for now, I must add it to the herd. I sighed. I knew Baramiz was a genius with numbers. I had seen him count the leaves on a tree and the birds in the sky. If he said he had a plan, he had a plan. I jumped down from the saddle. I took the leather rope and handed it to the man who counted. Take it, I said, but please be careful. Baramiz took the rope. He walked my beautiful white camel over to the group of 35 nervous animals. The brothers watched him in silence. They did not understand what was happening. They had their hands on the hilts of their daggers, ready to fight, but curiosity made them pause. Baramiz raised his voice so everyone could hear. My friends, he announced, I will now solve your problem. I will make a fair division of the inheritance. But to do this, I must make the herd larger. I am adding the camel of my friend to the 35 you already have. He tied my camel to the group. Now, the animals stood together in the dust. Count them, Baramiz shouted. The oldest brother counted. 1, 2, 3, 35, 36. We now have 36 camels, Baramiz said. The math is now different. The problem is now easy. Baramiz turned to the oldest brother first. He was a tall man with a dark beard and a suspicious face. You, the eldest son, Baramiz said. According to the will of your father, you were supposed to receive half of 35. That would be 17.5 camels. Since you cannot have half a camel, you were angry. But listen to me now. Since there are 36 camels, I will give you half of 36. The brother did the math in his head. Half of 36 is 18. Baramiz smiled. You will receive 18 camels. That is more than 17.5. You have gained a profit. Are you happy with this solution? The oldest brother's jaw dropped. His suspicious face turned into a big smile. By Allah, he cried out, it is true. I get 18 camels. I am very happy. You are a wise man. He immediately stepped forward and separated 18 of the best camels from the herd. He took them to his side of the camp. He was satisfied. Next, Baramiz turned to the second brother. This brother had been worried he would lose his share. And you, the second heir, Baramiz said, according to the will, you were to receive 1/3 of 35. That is 11 camels and some small pieces. It was not a good number. But now, look at the new herd. Baramiz pointed to the remaining animals. I will give you 1/3 of 36, Baramiz declared. Do you know what that number is? The second brother calculated quickly. 36 divided by 3 is 12. 12, the brother shouted. Exactly, Baramiz said. You will receive 12 camels. That is more than 11. You have also gained a profit. Are you happy? The second brother laughed. He was delighted. He had gained almost a whole extra camel just by listening to this stranger. I am very happy, he said. He took his 12 camels and moved them away to join his own camp. Finally, Baramiz turned to the youngest brother. The young man looked at Baramiz with awe. He realized that something magical was happening with the numbers. Young man, Baramiz said gently, you were supposed to receive 1/9 of 35. That is 3 camels and part of another. A very difficult share. But now I will give you 1/9 of 36. The young man smiled. That is 4, he said. Yes, Baramis answered. You will receive 4 camels. That is more than 3. You have also gained from this new arrangement. The youngest brother clapped his hands. He took his 4 camels and led them away. He was rich and he was happy. The 3 brothers stood with their new herds. They looked at each other. The anger was gone. The fighting was gone. Each of them had received more than they expected. It seemed impossible, but the camels were standing right there in front of them. Then Baramis spoke again. His voice was calm and full of authority. Let us check the total, he said. He pointed to the oldest brother. You have 18. He pointed to the middle brother. You have 12. He pointed to the youngest brother. You have 4. 18 plus 12 plus 4 equals 34. The brothers looked at the empty space in the middle of the camp. There were 2 camels left standing there. One was my beautiful white camel. The other was a strong, dark camel that had belonged to their father. Baramis smiled at the brothers. Look, he said, we have distributed 34 camels, but the total we started with was 36. That means there are 2 camels left over. He walked over and untied my camel. One of these belongs to my friend here, he said, handing the rope back to me. I returned it to him just as I promised. I took the rope, feeling a great sense of relief. My camel was safe. And the other one? The oldest brother asked, pointing to the last dark camel. Who does that belong to? Baramis stood tall. This last camel, he said, is the extra one. It remains because the math of 36 is perfect, while the math of 35 was flawed. Since I have solved your problem, and since I have made each of you richer than you were before, surely I deserve a reward for my work. The brothers looked at each other. They had 18, 12, and 4 camels. They were rich. They were happy. They had avoided a war. The oldest brother bowed low. Stranger, he said, you are a miracle worker. The solution is perfect. We have all gained. It is only fair that you keep the extra camel as your payment. Take it with our blessing. The other 2 brothers nodded in agreement. Take it, they cried. Baramis turned to me with a twinkle in his eye. My friend, he said, now we have a camel for you and a camel for me. We can travel to Baghdad in comfort. I was speechless. I climbed back onto my white camel. Baramis climbed onto the new dark camel. As we rode away from the oasis, the 3 brothers waved at us. They were cheering. They were the happiest men in the desert. They did not understand how it had happened. They only knew that a man had come, added a camel, and somehow everyone had walked away with more. I rode beside Baramis, shaking my head. You are amazing, I said. You gave them everything they wanted, you gave me my camel back, and you earned a camel for yourself. How is it possible? Baramis laughed as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the sand. It is not magic, my friend, he said. It is simply the beauty of numbers. Sometimes, to solve a problem, you must add something before you can divide it. And so, we continued our journey to the great city of Baghdad, riding 2 camels instead of 1, leaving peace behind us where there had once been war. Chapter 4. The Puzzle of the Wine Cellar. We traveled for 3 more days under the hot sun. The desert was vast and yellow, but my heart was light. I had my white camel back, and Baramis had a fine new animal to ride. We were a team now. As we rode, Baramis told me stories about numbers. He saw math in everything. He counted the birds in the sky. He counted the leaves on the palm trees. To him, the world was made of numbers. Soon, the empty sand turned into a road made of stone. We saw small houses and green gardens. We were getting close to the great city of Baghdad. We stopped to rest at a large inn on the edge of a small village. The inn was famous for its fine wine. It was a busy place. Merchants from faraway lands stopped here to trade and rest. The air smelled of dust and spices. But as we walked closer to the main building, a new smell filled the air. It was the heavy, sweet smell of purple grapes and wet wood. We tied our camels in the shade and walked toward a large stone door. This was the entrance to the wine cellar. The cellar was dug deep into the ground to keep the wine cool. Inside, it was dark and quiet. It felt good to be out of the burning sun. However, the peace did not last long. We heard angry voices echoing off the stone walls. "It is impossible," one voice shouted. "We cannot divide it fairly," yelled another. Beremiz and I walked further into the cellar. The room was large and filled with shadows. There were rows and rows of wooden barrels. In the center of the room stood 3 men. They were dressed in rich silk robes. They looked like wealthy merchants, but their faces were red with anger. They were arguing over a group of barrels stacked against the wall. Beremiz stepped forward. He raised his hand in a greeting of peace. "Greetings, my friends," Beremiz said calmly. "Why is there so much anger in such a cool and pleasant place?" The 3 men stopped arguing. They looked at Beremiz. They saw his simple clothes and his calm face. The oldest of the 3 men sighed and stepped forward. He wiped sweat from his forehead. "Traveler," he said, "we are business partners. We have worked together for many years. We sell the finest wine in the region. But today, we have a problem that we cannot solve. We are ready to fight each other because we cannot find a fair answer." "Tell me the problem," Beremiz said. "Perhaps I can help. Numbers are often the best judges." The merchant pointed to the stack of barrels against the wall. There were 21 barrels in total. They were large and heavy, made of dark oak wood. "Here is the puzzle," the merchant explained. "We have 21 barrels of rare wine, but they are not all the same. 7 of the barrels are completely full. 7 of the barrels are exactly half full, and 7 of the barrels are completely empty." I looked at the stack. It was a confusing mix. Full, half full, and empty. The merchant continued. "We want to divide these barrels among the 3 of us. We are equal partners, so we must share everything equally. Each of us must receive the same amount of wine, and each of us must receive the same number of barrels." "That sounds fair," I said. "It sounds fair, but it is hard to do," the second merchant cried out. He looked very frustrated. "We do not want to open the barrels. If we open them to measure the wine, the air will spoil the flavor. We must move the barrels as they are. How can we divide 7 full, 7 half full, and 7 empty barrels so that everyone gets the same amount of wine and the same number of wooden casks?" The third merchant threw his hands in the air. "We have tried for hours. If I take 3 full barrels, I have too much wine. If I take the empty ones, I have no wine. It is a headache." Beremiz stood silent for a moment. He looked at the barrels. He closed his eyes. I knew he was building a picture in his mind. He was arranging the barrels in rows inside his head. The smell of the old wine and the damp wood was strong, but Beremiz was focused only on the logic. After a short silence, Baramiz opened his eyes and smiled. "My friends," he said softly, "this looks difficult, but the solution is actually quite simple. You do not need to open any barrels. You do not need any measuring tools. You only need to think clearly." The three merchants leaned in close. They stopped shouting. They wanted to hear the answer. Baramiz pointed to the first merchant. "You, my friend, shall take 3 of the full barrels. You shall also take 1 of the half-full barrels. And finally, you shall take 3 of the empty barrels." The merchant counted on his fingers. 3 full, 1 half, 3 empty. That is 7 barrels in total. "Yes," said Baramiz. "Now let us look at the wine. You have 3 full measures and 1 half measure. That is 3.5 units of wine." Baramiz then turned to the second merchant. "You cannot have the same arrangement," Baramiz said, "but you will have the same value. You shall take 2 of the full barrels. You shall take 3 of the half-full barrels. And you shall take 2 of the empty barrels." The second merchant thought about it. 2 full, 3 halves, 2 empty. That is also 7 barrels. "Correct," said Baramiz. "And the wine? 2 full measures plus 3 half measures equals 3.5 units of wine. You have exactly the same amount of wine as your partner." Baramiz turned to the third merchant. "And you," he said, "you shall take the same share as the second partner. You take the last 2 full barrels. You take the last 3 half-full barrels. And you take the last 2 empty barrels." The third merchant did the math quickly. 7 barrels. And the wine was 2 full plus 3 halves. It was 3.5 units. The cellar was silent. The 3 men looked at each other. The anger melted away from their faces. They looked at the barrels, then at Baramiz, then back at the barrels. The solution was perfect. First partner, 3 full, 1 half, 3 empty. Second partner, 2 full, 3 half, 2 empty. Third partner, 2 full, 3 half, 2 empty. Everyone had 7 barrels. Everyone had the same amount of wine. Not a single drop was spilled. Not a single barrel was opened. "By Allah," the oldest merchant shouted, "it is true, it works. Why did we not see this?" "Because you were looking at the problem with worry, not with logic," Baramiz said gently. "Sometimes the eyes are clouded by stress. Numbers clear the vision." The merchants were overjoyed. They laughed and clapped each other on the back. The heavy atmosphere of the cellar vanished. Now it felt like a place of celebration. "You have saved our partnership," the oldest merchant said. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small leather bag. It clinked with the sound of gold coins. "Please, wise stranger, take this as a token of our thanks. And please join us for a meal. We have much fine wine to share now that we know how to divide it." Baramiz bowed politely. "We thank you for your offer, but we must continue to Baghdad. However, we are happy to have helped." We left the cool, dark cellar and walked back out into the bright afternoon. The smell of the grapes faded, replaced by the warm scent of the earth. I looked at Baramiz with great respect. "You did it again," I said. "First the camels, now the wine. Is there anything you cannot solve?" Baramiz smiled as he climbed onto his camel. "It is not me, my friend," he said. "It is the numbers. They are always there, waiting to be found. We just have to look for them." We rode away from the inn, leaving 3 happy friends behind us. The road to Baghdad stretched out ahead, long and inviting. I wondered what other puzzles were waiting for us in the great city. I knew that whatever happened, the man who counted would be ready. Chapter 5. The Greedy Innkeeper and the Jeweler. The sun was high in the sky. It beat down on the desert sand until the air shimmered with heat. My camel walked slowly, and I wiped sweat from my forehead. The journey to Baghdad was long, and the road was dusty. Baramiz, my friend, looked calm. He did not seem to mind the heat. He was always thinking, always counting. But even a man of numbers needs water and shade. "Look there," I said, pointing a finger at the horizon. "I see walls and a roof. It is an inn." We rode our camels toward the building. It was a large inn made of stone. Many people were there. Travelers, merchants, and soldiers stopped to rest. Horses and camels stood in the yard, drinking from a large trough. The smell of roasted meat and strong spices drifted out the front door. It made my stomach growl. We tied our camels in the shade and walked inside. The main room was noisy. People laughed, shouted, and clanged their cups on wooden tables. Smoke from the kitchen hung in the air. It was a busy place, full of life and confusion. We found a small table in the corner and sat down. A servant brought us cool water and a plate of dates. As we ate, a loud voice rose above the noise of the room. "You are a thief," the voice shouted. "I will not let you leave until you pay me what is right." I looked toward the counter. A large man stood there. He was the innkeeper. He had a big belly and a red face. He wore fine clothes, but his eyes looked greedy. He was shouting at a smaller man who looked very nervous. The smaller man was a traveler. He wore a dusty blue robe. On the table between them lay a small velvet bag. The bag was open. Inside, I saw bright flashes of color. They were jewels. There were rubies as red as blood, emeralds as green as grass, and sapphires as blue as the deep sea. They sparkled in the dim light of the inn. Baramiz stood up. He did not like anger. He liked peace and order. He walked over to the two men. I followed him, curious to see what was happening. "Peace be upon you," Baramiz said calmly. "Why is there so much noise? This is a place of rest, not a place of war." The innkeeper looked at Baramiz. He saw a man in simple clothes, but he felt the power in Baramiz's voice. He lowered his hand, but he still looked angry. "This man is trying to cheat me," the innkeeper grumbled. "He stayed in my best room. He ate my best food. Now he does not want to pay the bill." "That is not true," the traveler cried. He held up his hands. "I am a jeweler. I came here to sell these stones to a rich merchant in the next town. I am an honest man. We made a deal before I slept here." "Tell me the deal," Baramiz said. He looked at the shining jewels, then at the innkeeper. Numbers can settle any argument. The jeweler took a deep breath. He spoke clearly. "When I arrived, I did not have much money. I told the innkeeper I would sell my jewels. We made an agreement on the price of my stay. If I sold the jewels for 100 dinars, I would pay him 20 dinars. If I sold the jewels for 200 dinars, I would pay him 35 dinars. Baramiz nodded. "That is a clear agreement. So what happened?" "I sold the jewels for 140 dinars, the jeweler said. "I did well, but not as well as I hoped." The innkeeper slammed his hand on the counter. The cups jumped. "Exactly," the innkeeper shouted. "He sold them for a high price. 140 is much more than 100. Therefore, he should pay me much more. I am demanding 40 dinars. 40, the jeweler said. That is too much. It does not follow our deal, but I do not know how to calculate the right number. The innkeeper crossed his arms over his chest. He smiled a mean smile. If you cannot calculate it, you must pay what I ask, or I will call the guards. Baramis stepped between them. He raised a hand. Wait, Baramis said. There is no need for guards. The math is simple. The innkeeper is wrong, but the jeweler is also confused. Let us find the true number. The room went quiet. The other travelers turned to listen. They liked to see a puzzle solved. Baramis looked at the innkeeper. You agreed on 2 prices, Baramis explained. Let us look at the difference. The difference between the low sale price of 100 and the high sale price of 200 is exactly 100 dinars. Yes, that is true, said the innkeeper. And the difference in your bill, Baramis continued, is between 20 dinars and 35 dinars. That is a difference of 15 dinars. I watched Baramis's face. His eyes were bright. He was seeing the numbers floating in the air. So Baramis said, for every 100 dinars of extra sale money, the bill goes up by 15 dinars. He turned to the jeweler. You sold the jewels for 140. That is 40 dinars more than the base price of 100. Baramis held up a finger. We must find the value of that 40. If 100 dinars of sale adds 15 to the bill, then what does 40 add? The innkeeper frowned. He was trying to do the math in his head, but he was slow. Baramis spoke slowly, so everyone could understand. Think of it this way. 15 is the total increase allowed. The number 40 is 2/5 of 100, so we must take 2/5 of 15. I did the math in my head. 1/5 of 15 is 3. 2/5 is 6. 6, I shouted. The increase is 6 dinars. Baramis smiled at me. My friend is correct. The increase is 6 dinars. He turned back to the innkeeper. The base price was 20 dinars. We add the increase of 6 dinars. The total price the jeweler must pay is 26 dinars. The innkeeper opened his mouth to argue. He wanted 40 dinars, but he looked around the room. The other travelers were nodding. The logic was perfect. It was fair. If he argued now, he would look like a fool and a cheat. 26 dinars, the innkeeper grumbled. Fine, give me the money and go. The jeweler let out a long sigh of relief. He quickly opened his purse and counted out 26 gold coins. He placed them on the counter. Thank you, wise stranger, the jeweler said to Baramis. You have saved me 14 dinars. That is a lot of money for a simple man. He reached into his bag of jewels. He pulled out a small blue stone. It was not the biggest stone, but it was beautiful. Please take this, the jeweler said. It is a gift for your help. Baramis shook his head gently. Keep your stone, my friend. I did not do this for a reward. I did it for the truth. Numbers are the language of truth. When the math is right, justice is served. The jeweler bowed low. He packed his bag and hurried out of the inn, happy to be back on the road. The innkeeper looked at the coins on his counter. He looked at Baramis with a strange expression. It was a mix of respect and annoyance. He knew he had been beaten by a better mind. Come, Baramis said to me, let us finish our meal. The road to Baghdad is still long. We sat back down at our table. The noise of the inn returned, but it felt different now. People glanced at our table and whispered. They knew that a man of great wisdom was sitting among them. I drank my water and looked at Beremiz. He was already looking at a pattern of tiles on the floor, counting them silently. "You make it look easy," I said. Beremiz shrugged. "The world is full of problems," he said. "Most of them are just numbers in disguise." We rested for an hour more, then paid our own bill, which was fair, and went back to our camels. As we rode away from the inn, the sun began to set. The sky turned purple and orange. I felt safe riding with the man who counted. I knew that no matter what problem we faced, he would find the answer. Chapter 6. The Secret of the 4 Fours. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of deep purple and gray. The heat of the day vanished quickly. It was replaced by a sharp, dry chill. We decided to stop for the night near a cluster of old, dry palm trees. It was a quiet place. The only sound was the wind whispering over the sand dunes. We gathered some dry wood and lit a small fire. The orange flames danced in the dark. They cast long, moving shadows against the sand. We ate our simple dinner of dates and dried bread in silence. The fire crackled, popping every now and then. Above us, the sky was a blanket of black velvet, covered in bright, shining stars. Beremiz, the man who counted, sat cross-legged by the fire. He did not look tired. His eyes were wide and alert. He picked up a smooth, thin stick from the ground. He stared at the sand in front of him as if it were a blank piece of paper waiting for a story. "My friend," Beremiz said softly. His voice was low, like he was telling a secret. "Have you ever thought about the beauty of the number 4? I looked at him across the fire. I had not thought about it. To me, a 4 was just a 4. "Look," he said. He leaned forward and scratched a shape in the sand with his stick. He drew the number 4. Then he drew 3 more next to it. 4, 4, 4, 4. "Here we have 4 fours," he said. "It looks simple. But these 4 numbers can do magic. With just these 4 digits, we can create almost any number. It is like building a whole city using only one type of brick." He smoothed the sand with his hand, erasing the numbers. He prepared the ground for his first spell. "Let us try to make the number 0, Beremiz said. He moved the stick with purpose. It scratched against the grains of sand. He wrote, 44 minus 44. "Look," he pointed, 44 minus 44. The answer is 0. We used 4 fours and we created nothingness. It is perfect balance." I nodded. That was easy to see. "Now let us create the number 1, he continued. He did not look up. He was focused on the game. He wrote again in the sand. 44 divided by 44. "Any number divided by itself is 1, he explained. So 44 divided by 44 gives us 1. We have created unity from 4 parts. The firelight flickered on his face. He looked like a wizard casting spells, but his magic came from logic, not potions. "Can you make bigger numbers?" I asked. The game was beginning to interest me. It seemed impossible to make every number this way. Beremiz smiled. His teeth shone white in the firelight. "Of course. Let us try the number 5. He thought for a moment. The stick hovered over the sand. Then he wrote a new formula. He wrote a 4 multiplied by a 4. Then he added 4. He drew a line under it all and put a 4 underneath. 4x4 plus 4 / 4. "Watch the steps," he said. 4 times 4 is 16. Then we add 4. That makes 20. Now we divide 20 by the last 4. The answer is 5. I did the math in my head. He was right. It was beautiful. It was like a puzzle where all the pieces fit perfectly. What about a difficult number? I challenged him. Can you make 24? Baramiz laughed gently. 24 is a strong number. It is the number of hours in a day. Let us see. He cleared a new space in the sand. The stick scratched loudly in the quiet night. 4x4 plus 4 plus 4. He pointed to each part of the equation. 4 times 4 is 16. We have 2 4s left. We add 4 to 16, which makes 20. We add the last 4, and we have 24. He paused and looked at the stars. But there is another way to make 24. We can use a special sign. He drew a 4 with an exclamation mark next to it. 4. In the language of mathematics, this mark means we multiply the number by every number smaller than it, Baramiz explained. So 4 with this mark means 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. If you multiply those, the answer is 24. He looked at me with a twinkle in his eye. Now, if we want to make 25, we can use that special trick. He wrote in the sand, 4 plus 4, 4. We know the first part is 24, he said, and we know that 4 divided by 4 is 1. So, 24 plus 1 equals 25. I sat back and stared at the numbers in the sand. The wind blew a little harder, shifting the grains, but the numbers remained clear in the glow of the fire. It felt miraculous. Baramiz had taken a single digit, the number 4, and twisted it, added it, and divided it to create entirely new values. It is like poetry, I said. You make the numbers rhyme. Baramiz dropped the stick. He rubbed his hands together to warm them. Numbers are the language of truth, he said again. They do not lie. They do not change their minds. If you treat them with respect, they will show you their secrets. The fire began to die down. The flames turned into glowing red coals. The desert night grew colder. I wrapped my cloak tighter around my shoulders. We should sleep, Baramiz said. He smoothed the sand one last time, erasing the magic numbers. The 4 4s disappeared, returning to the desert floor. Tomorrow, the road to Baghdad continues. There will be more problems to solve. I lay down on my blanket, looking up at the vast sky. I tried to count the stars, but there were too many. As I drifted off to sleep, I imagined the stars were arranged in groups of 4, waiting for Baramiz to count them. The silence of the desert was deep and peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, the world made perfect sense. Chapter 7: A Legacy of Numbers and Stories. The fire in the desert has burned down to embers. The story of Baramiz Samir, the man who counted, comes to a quiet end. We leave him under the stars of Baghdad, ready to solve new riddles. But there is one final puzzle we must look at. This puzzle is not about camels or birds. It is about the man who created Baramiz. It is a story about a teacher from Brazil named Julio Cesar de Melo e Souza. Julio Cesar was born in Rio de Janeiro in 1895. He was a teacher of mathematics. He saw that many children were afraid of numbers. They looked at math problems and saw only hard work and confusion. They did not see the beauty or the poetry. Julio Cesar wanted to change this. He wanted to show the world that mathematics could be an adventure. He decided to write stories. However, he did not put his own name on the cover of his most famous books. Instead, he created a character to be the author. He signed his books as Malba Tahan. He created a whole history for this make-believe author. He said Malba Tahan was a wise scholar from the Middle East. This made the stories feel magical and exotic. It made readers feel like they were traveling to a faraway land of sultans and viziers. Under this new name, Julio Cesar wrote more than 100 books. His most famous book was the one we have just journeyed through, The Man Who Counted. It was published in 1938. It became very famous. Millions of people bought it. It is still popular today. In Brazil and in many other countries, children and adults still read it to learn how to think clearly. Julio Cesar was not an Arab, but he loved Arab culture. When he was a boy, he read a famous collection of stories called The 1001 Nights. He fell in love with the tales of genies and magic lamps. As he grew older, he studied very hard. He read the Quran and the Talmud. He studied the history and geography of Arab lands. He wanted his stories to be respectful and true to the spirit of the people he admired. He built a bridge between two very different worlds. He connected the tropical land of Brazil with the ancient deserts of the Middle East. He showed that wisdom does not belong to just one country. Logic and kindness are universal languages. The story of the 35 camels is the perfect example of his genius. Think back to that problem. The 3 brothers were ready to fight. They were angry because they could not divide the camels evenly. Their anger made them blind to the solution. Baramiz solved the problem by adding his own camel to the group. He turned 35 into 36. Suddenly, the math was easy. The first brother got half, which was 18. The second got a third, which was 12. The youngest got a ninth, which was 4. When you add those numbers up, they equal 34. There were 2 camels left over. One went back to Baramiz and the other was his prophet. Everyone was happy. This is more than just a math trick. It is a lesson about life. Sometimes, when people are fighting over how to share something, the solution is not to fight harder. The solution is to be generous. By adding something to the pot, Baramiz made sure everyone walked away satisfied. He used logic to bring peace. Julio Cesar taught us that a sharp mind can solve problems that swords cannot. He showed us that numbers are not cold and unfeeling. Numbers can be used to settle arguments and make friends. The teacher passed away in 1974, but his legacy remains. Every time a student opens his book and smiles at a math problem, Julio Cesar lives on. He taught us that mathematics is the language of truth, but storytelling is the language of the heart. When you combine them, you can do wonderful things. So the next time you see a difficult problem, do not be afraid. Remember the man who counted. Remember that with a little imagination and simple logic, there is always a solution waiting to be found. The stars in the sky are numberless, but down here on Earth, everything counts.